Hey guys, Tim here, Big Dog Forge. Welcome back. I got a little project I got to get done today. It's related to my work. It's an area I get into occasionally. It's not an everyday thing when it's required. Typically, the stuff I work with is a lot more modern, but once in a while, you got to do a little sort of restoration work and building pieces and parts. In this case, we're going to be building a spring and doing a little forging, a little brazing, stuff like that. Anyway. Stick with me. Should be fun, and you get to see a little bit of what I do for a living. All right, guys. Should be fun. All right, guys. Here's what we've got. We've got a Yale mortise lock. It's a residential thing. Probably built between 1925 and 1935, 40, somewhere in there. It's hard to nail these things down. Not a lot of literature left on them. So that spring, I just replaced that. That's the handle return and latch bolt return spring. Okay. And we'll get the spindle hub back in. Now this is the gate for the key. The key lifts the gate and allows the deadbolt to slide through the gate to the locking position on the opposite side. So what we're going to do is create a key that will lift the gate to the proper height and push the deadbolt in and out. The owner has no keys for this particular lock, and searching out just the right key is a little difficult. There are keys available in sort of a generic size and shape, but this one's a little different. You can see the left side of the keyhole here where it's got that jagged look. This is where the cut of the key used to be for a specific key that went in there. This is going to make our job a little easier. It means the top of the key is going to be flat, and the side of the key is where the cut was. So we'll just narrow the key up to get past those cuts, and we should be in good shape. Alright, so we're going to turn the pin of the basic key, which is the leading portion that goes through the lock, on the lathe here. So we're just cutting this out of mild steel, and we're going to check it against the lock. There we go. Now, right up against the side of the lock where the key goes in, there's sort of a countersunk area, and that countersink is there to accept the collar. And when you see a what people refer to as a skeleton key, there's a small raised area that sits right up against the lock. It's called the collar. The side towards the lock is actually called the throwing, and the side opposite that is called the collar, even though it's the same piece. Okay, so at this point what we're doing is we're turning down the shank. This would be the shank of the key. And we're going to get that collar just the right size. You want it to be the same size round as the countersink on the side of the lock. The reason being is because it has to go through a plate, or an escutcheon plate is what they call it, on the outside of the door to reach into the lock. If the collar is too large, it won't fit through the escutcheon plate and get into the lock area. Alright, a little out of focus there. Okie doke. You can see how that fits right in there, and it's about the same size as that countersink, and that rotates in there nice. Okie doke. That's about all we're going to do on the lathe. We're going to head over to the forge, get this thing in a pair of tongs, and we're going to go right into the forge with it. We're going to heat this guy up, and we're going to, every few seconds, we're going to quench the tip of this to keep that shank, the collar, and the pin from losing any size from scale. And just above the shank, we're going to go ahead and flatten out this round, and this is going to become the bow of our key. And we're going to flatten it out good. And then we're going to get ourselves a punch. We're going to mark a little hole, and we're going to punch a hole through the center of this. And we'll do a little work there so that you can hang it on a pin, put it on a key ring, use it as a key ring for other keys, that kind of thing, if you so desire. Alright, I actually had a little bit of trouble with this. It should have punched through the first time, and it's a little odd shaped, and you got to drop it a half a dozen times or you're not doing it right. And practice makes perfect. There we go. There, a little plug out. Now we're going to drift this guy out, and we drifted him out to about a 3/8 inch hole. And we're going to drift both ways through, even that hole out, keep it nice and uniform. And we're going to get it over the horn of the smaller anvil here, so we can start working that thing out. Keep it nice and round. And we're going to go ahead and forge this way. Didn't want to machine it, wanted to give it, sort of that old feeling. We got it to the bandsaw, and we just cut the excess material off the top, got it off that parent rod, cleaned it up a little on a belt sander to get it kind of round, and we're going to get it back to the forge, and we're going to continue working on that bow. And you could do all sorts of fancy things with these bows. You can, put all sorts of decorations into them, make them odd shapes, whatever. We could oval it, that kind of thing. I prefer to leave them round. They sit a little easier on a key ring that way. All right. And you see where that collar fits right into the countersunk area of the lock. Comes right through the other side, and it rotates in there nicely. All right, we're going to get ready to put the bit in. So what we're going to do is we're going to split the end of the key, or the pin, all the way up to the collar, and we're going to fit that with a piece of mild steel, and that's what we'll be using for our bit. And we're going to keep it quite large. We'll get this filed out a little bit, and we'll have to thin up our mild steel just a tad, and we'll get a nice snug fit in there. That'll allow us to hammer that pin together over it. It'll hold it in place while we continue to work on this thing. And it takes a little bit of fidgeting to get things just right when you're dealing with something this small, and it needs to come out pretty close to perfect. You got to take your time, file your pieces, keep an eye on what's going on. All right, we'll get that tapped into place, and we'll close that pin up on that. And you're going to notice that it's going to stick out the back, and it's going to be crooked. And what we have there is we have a bunch of excess material that we can work with, that we can use a file to file it down. So we're going to get this into the forge. We're going to get it nice and warm, a little bit of borax on it, and that's nothing more than a brass rod. And with that borax in there, that brass flows all down and around inside, all through that, and it braised it on that bit onto the pin very nicely. And it's a real quick and easy thing to do. You could use a torch to do it with, but I find you get a lot more even heat this way. All right, so we're going to start on the back of the pin where we had our bit protruding through the pin, and we'll get all this cleaned up. So it's just a whole bunch of filing, and you basically take the brass off until you get just down to the steel, and that'll bring you back to the size that you needed when you created the pin. So the area between the bit and the pin, that where they meet, the part that I'm scraping out there now, is crucial, because that pin has to act, like I said, as an axle, and it has to keep its round shape to keep the bit stable while it does its job rotating inside the lock. There's quite a bit of filing to get this down. This bit, we're not going to worry too much about it. We're going to clean it up just a little bit so we can get some marks on it, and then we can start shaping it for what we need inside the lock. And this particular guy is not going to have a lot of cuts on it. It's going to be a pretty basic thing because the way this lock was built. So we need to cut the bit off to fit inside the hole, and then we need the width, and you can gauge that based on the seams along either side of the lock. And we're going to put a couple little undercuts in there. Yeah, remark that so I can see a little bit better. There we go. Use a sharp end of the pencil, a goofball. Alright. And that's going to be a rough cut shape. It'll come out a little wonky, but we'll do a little bit of filing on that to get it back into shape. Alright. We're going to do our little back cuts on the sides. Now, typically these particular types of keys will have sort of a radius cut on either side of the bit, or they'll have notches cut into them, depending on what the lock requires. On this particular lock, we're pretty lucky because it doesn't require much of anything. It's pretty much going to be a square top. We're going to put a couple of radii, one on either side of that bit to give it some shape, more aesthetic than anything. It'll give it a little clearance for the inside of the lock so it doesn't rub on anything. But it's at this point just a bunch of filing and fitting. You file it and try it to lock, file it and try it to lock until you get it to where you need it to be. If it had other cuts for the top of the key, we'd have to do a lot more refined measurements. In this case, like I said, we just got lucky. And what we're going to do is keep that key narrow so we don't have to worry about side cuts on that key to fit into that lock. And it's sort of you could refer to it as a typical skeleton key, which is kind of a master key for these things. Just kind of fits everything. So a little bit more filing on the end, get her dressed up, and we'll try it out in the lock and see how we're doing here. And like I said, you want to just take that brass off the surface. There we go. She seems to be working okay. Try the other side. Has to work equally well from either side. Alright. There we go. And try it a dozen times on either side to make sure that things work. Alright. So, you notice I've got a hold of the bit with the tongs. And that's where the brass is. You want to keep it a little cooler down there, so you grab the bit with the tongs, get it into the forge, and the tongs will act like a heat sink. And you bring it just high enough to get some wax on it. And that'll coat it, keep it from rusting. And you don't want to take it so far that your bronze melts and you lose your bit. There you go. So we decided to make 2 keys for the customer. There you go. I always have a spare. All right. There you go, guys. So I've done quite a bit of this type of restoration in the past. Typically I work with a lot more modern stuff, a lot of electronic stuff, things like that, security type stuff. And these guys are a lot of fun to work with because of all the brass and cast pieces that are inside. And I quite often have to cast pieces for the inside of these when I run across somebody that needs one repaired. This is an oddball lock. It's for a double rabbeted door. Used to put them on like French doors, things like that. And anyway, it was busted. It had a broken spring inside, and it had no keys for the deadbolt function. So we got that all squared away and made a couple of keys for the owner. And there you go. I hope you didn't find it too boring. It's my life. I know, right? Anyway, thanks for watching, guys. I really appreciate it. So if you think about it, why don't you click that little like button down there if you like what you saw. A little insight to what I do. You might want to share the video. That'd be good. And subscribe if you haven't subscribed yet. If you're new to the channel, there's lots of other cool videos. And we have lots of fun here. So why not, right? All right, guys. Oh, and make sure you check out the collaboration between Big Dog Forge, which is here, and Booyah Forge, which is run by Rick Rabjon. And I'll leave a link in the description below for that. We're doing a collaboration, and first couple of videos I think came out today, and I just received a box back from him, so there'll be a video coming out tomorrow. And that's pretty cool collaboration. You should check that out. Anyway, guys, I appreciate you stopping by. Thanks. Be safe. Take care of yourselves. Be responsible. And have a happy new year. All right, guys. We'll talk to you soon. Take care. Bye-bye now.